Hello my friends, welcome back to a brand new This Week in Social Media. We talk about the fact that YouTube is going after ad blockers. We give you an update on X's Brazil ban. We talk about the first transparency report that X put out after Elon has bought the company. We talk about some of the top skills that you need to be a social media manager in 2024. We talk about a new letter talking about AI development in the EU. We talk about some key takeaways from MetaConnect, as well as some new updates regarding the Mr. Beast and Amazon Studios named lawsuit that we covered in the last week's show. YouTube started rolling out a ad placement new product this week, where when you pause a video, it's likely you'll be issued or shown a display ad. There's been some controversy and some people have reinitiated or used ad blockers more so it's opened up this larger conversation around where does ad blockers sit on the internet, but specifically in YouTube's case, because obviously YouTube's main source of revenue, and also YouTube creators as well, the main bulk of their revenue comes from advertising. This has also come as YouTube goes out of its way to stamp out or be a little bit more ahead on that cat and mouse game when it comes to getting on top of ad blockers and trying to stop ad blockers existing on YouTube. We heard from Moist Critical or Penguin Zero this week with a video that claimed it was talking about the topic where most creators would rather have a good viewing experience and then therefore they're going to watch their content longer than a shit one. Meaning then they're going to leave the website, and this is kind of the argument, right? I think it's a debate or a reality where you can either YouTube, in my view, obviously it has some hard costs, right? As a running a YouTube style YouTube platform, there's a lot of server costs to host billions of hours worth of YouTube content that's uploaded, on a daily basis in that respect. But it's the question, I guess, and it comes to the question, I guess, of as a user, someone who consumes content on YouTube, advertising is unfortunately going to be part of our life, unfortunately, depending on how you look at it. And I think it's about how that, for me anyway, I think it's about having that experience and tailoring that experience to ensure that it's in line with the user, in line with the customer. Because I saw a meme, and I know I talked about it in last week's show, where, if you're showing me a video ad and you're showing me about a product, I'm going to be frustrated because you're interrupting the content I'm there to consume. Now, it's possible, and it's likely, that a lot of those people aren't going to necessarily buy anyway. So it's more around, if you have an ad platform, that we're not going to be able to get away from the world where ads aren't online, right? It's how most newspapers make their money. It's how YouTubers make their money. It's how YouTube as a platform makes its money. It's how most of TV commercials, etc., make their money. And also, it's also how we generate more revenue for our businesses, right? So that's the reality. The conversation here is, why is people moving to ad block? Why are people moving? Because the ads are intrusive, the ads are annoying, the ads are irritating. You're being served subpar ads, perhaps, about stuff that you don't necessarily like or enjoy, right? Or likely to be educated on, or likely to want to see. So that's going to change how we operate from a distribution point of view. And also, as YouTube, they should be focusing on the people spending money to do YouTube ads. What targeting metrics can we actually have? What can we make sure it's been shown to the right people and not going to do damage potentially to our brand or our business by showing an ad to someone who A, isn't going to buy, 2, isn't interested, and 3, doesn't necessarily want to see that ad specifically. But also it leans back to how good are your ads in general, right? Because if you have a captivating ad, and I found myself watching ads that are genuinely interesting and are genuinely well done because they are good pieces of content. Do they have a good hook? A lot of the ads that we're notoriously known and seeing on YouTube is the banner display ads, the banner ads below the video, but then also the skippable ads below or before as a pre-roll or a mid-roll or an end roll as part of that YouTube package, right? Watching that YouTube video. And I think if you have skippable ads, yes, the ads will be paid, and yes, that's a way a creator and YouTube can make their money, but it allows the user to skip the ads they don't care about and potentially watch the ads they do care about, which actually I think as an advertiser would be more beneficial to the advertiser, because it means that you're going to be number one, watched by the right audience, the right people, the people who care about your product, which is going to means higher conversion and a better trust reality building when it comes to that marketing effort, because at the end of the day that's what an ad is used for. But then also as a user experience, you're not going to be pissed off by a ad or a product or a business that is kind of saying, hey look, we need to see this ad, hey look, we need to see this, etc. And I think that's the important element, and that's one of the things that this conversation should be more aligned around. And I think it's more likely, and I hope that YouTube sees it and focuses more on the customer experience, focus more on the actual consumer consuming that content on YouTube, especially as we've seen, more people viewing content on TV, right? We covered in a couple of weeks ago show that YouTube has become the first streaming platform to hit 10% of TV watching. So as a younger generation is growing up, they're more likely to watch TV, YouTube on their TV. Therefore, those ad placements are going to be more important, and what ads are you being served and how you're being served them is going to become more important if it's going to continue to grow. So what do you think YouTube should do? Should they go around this adding more ads into any little area that they can? So in the pause menu, serving more ads before. So, I remember a couple of months ago, you'd be served 3 ads before your YouTube video, etc. And, I think most people would just click off. Is that a good reality, or should they double down on the customer experience or the client experience or the consumer experience to ensure and make sure that they're creating a better user experience, which means more people are going to use the platform and more people are going to create content, and then in turn more people are actually going to be able to profit and actually get its best of every world. But let me know in the comment section down below. Did you know that 98.7% of you do not subscribe to the channel? So I would really, really appreciate it if you're enjoying the content, enjoying the topics, enjoying the show, if you could subscribe to the channel so you can be notified when I put out a new topic video. Moving on to X's update ban. Lots of conversation, lots has happened. So it turns out that X and Elon being banned has gone ahead with banning the accounts that shared, quote, lies about the 2022 Brazilian election, that it was, quote, stolen, as reported by the New York Times, quote, in a court filing on Friday night, the 20th of September, the company's lawyers said that X has complied with the orders from Brazilian Supreme Court in the hopes that the court would lift a site-wide ban. As well as banning the accounts in question, X has also named a new representative in the Brazilian region. One of the reasons why it was banned in the first place, because as we covered in the original conversation, when Elon shut down the office and then moved all of the people out of Brazil, it let them or allowed them or put them in a position where they would be against Brazilian law because they wouldn't have a representative there. Will this push X to become more brand safe, as it's likely to be seen as it would go and be pushed or could be pushed by governments to remove accounts for sharing lies? And you may agree that this is a good thing, or it may bring the question of, is Elon really, or X really, standing up for the freedom of speech plan and the freedom of speech conversation that they had as well? Will it stand its ground when it comes to misinformation or disinformation? It's likely to be heightened, or that there's heightened concerns as we go into the US election in the next 8 weeks or so, and also with heightened tensions in the Middle East and Russia at the moment, that in most cases you could say are one of the main reasons, or one of the main realities about where misinformation campaigns come from. So with this, with Elon kind of going back on what he originally said, and originally, the financial pain that the company in X was potentially looking at, because it was locked off to 200 million Brazilian users, is that something which is going to be seen as, if we push him enough, he will do, what we will, and will that fall into, pushing off misinformation, pushing off opinions that criticize a government, perhaps, right? Or is it solely going to be stuff that's factually proven, right? And I think that's the conversation at the moment, because of this about turn, because of the fact that he's now looking to comply after basically saying, no, I'm not going to comply for a bit. And we saw very similar with SpaceX's Starlink as well. From the Social Media Today article, one of the articles that we use for this story, quote, X will still, however, have to pay a number of fines, which has included the recent announcement that plenty have continued to use the app using a VPN service. Those fines will stretch into the millions, but getting X back online will obviously be worth it to the company long term, end quote. This comes as X is, quote, in a fairly dire financial situation, end quote, with advertisers seeing the platform as non-safe, as we covered in last week's show. So there has also been reports that Elon has, quote, as such, I do think it's also worth nothing, as X has complied with similar requests in Turkey, India and Germany, all of which have broader value to Musk and his companies, end quote. So do you think this is a double standard? Is he just looking after people who he agrees with politically, or he likes what they're saying, right? This is the conversation. And, there has also been conversations as well about him removing leftist or more liberal accounts from X. They maybe don't agree with his politics, right? So they don't synergize. So, where's their freedom of speech? Is there going to be this double standard? And I think it does, as I said a little bit earlier, I think it does open up this question of, how are we going to navigate misinformation? How are we going to navigate disinformation, especially with the lead up to the US election? Is it going to be something where Elon will just, if you're one side of the fence or another, is it going to be you're likely to get banned or suppressed if you hold that view? We also reported a couple of weeks ago that, hate speech was quote unquote allowed on the platform, but it wouldn't necessarily be spread out. So it's freedom of speech, not freedom of reach, right? So it can't be necessarily found. So the people who potentially want to find that content or see that content have to go and search it out. Will we potentially see X do the same for a non-political opinion? Or is it going to be solely down to if there's enough evidence or enough pressure from an official court or official government body or etc.? Is it going to close? Are they going to just comply, right? We've seen, as I already reported, that he's already honoured some of the requests from Turkey, India and Germany, in that respect as well, and now following Brazil. So was this kind of a tiff to just get some, some point or some reality to be shared about, I do stand up for freedom of speech, but not enough if it actually hurts my businesses too much in regards to finance. But that's all we know regarding the ban. I'll leave some other resources that I didn't necessarily quote or didn't necessarily talk about down below within the source notes. So it does look like X will be returning to Brazil sooner rather than later. Do you think Elon is correct in his, pivot, his change of complying with the Brazilian government? Or should he have stood his ground and said, no, I'm going to stand up for freedom of speech and I'm not going to, fall down in that respect? But I would love to hear what you think down below, and I'll be interested to see how it's handled regarding the US election as well. In other X news this week, we also got to see the first transparency report from X since Elon has bought the company. The report itself shows that, quote, reported rules violations, content removal requests and other enforcement actions between January 24 and June 24. So this is the first half of 2024, and it basically just, as I say, shows what did they remove, how did they remove it, and why, and those numbers, which with a more, I think this is really interesting because of Elon's process, or Elon's conversation around freedom of speech, and him saying it's going to be a freer platform under me specifically in that respect as well, with, quote, X reporting that they have suspended 5.2 million accounts in the first half of the year based on rules violation, and removed 10.7 million posts due to also rule violations. From the research I've done on the show, it sounds like the X, or Twitter, is leaning in or reflecting on, quote, more broader reliance on automation due to fewer staff, end quote, so that overall, despite Elon's claims that it's a more open and free speech aligned network, X has also actually removed more content, suspended more users, and actioned more legal requests than Twitter had done. Yet it's now allowed to promote hate speech, has remained active, while self-harm content has seemingly not been as enforced as harshly. So by the sound of it, again, it kind of leans into the previous story around this double standard, because if he's saying in one breath, oh, Elon, X is this freedom of speech platform and this freedom of speech reality, if you're removing more content, you're suspending more users, and you're honouring more legal requests to remove stuff, that's taking more stuff off the platform. So is it freer? I don't think so. I will leave, obviously, the full transparency report down below, but it was very interesting to see, and it'd be interesting to see the next one, which I imagine will cover the second half of 2024, to see whether that trend has continued to go up, with Elon potentially removing and then banning, obviously, more accounts. Is it a fairer system to not have a human in place? Yes, it's more efficient from a business point of view, but is it, computers can get it wrong in the same way humans can get it wrong? Are they more or less likely to get it wrong? But I would love to hear what you think in the comments down below, so why not let me know. Do you think that Elon can turn around the finances, is turning it around, is going to be able to turn it into this quote-unquote freedom of speech advocate, or freedom of speech reality? Or is it just going to become, to quote another commenter on another video, a cancerous platform? I would love to hear what you think in the comment section down below. In social media news, we also got to see and got the ability to see a new infographic from the team over at Red Website Design. They claimed the top 9 skills needed for a social media manager, or someone who works in the social media space. The first being writing and editing skills. So obviously it's not something you can get away from, unfortunately, because every single piece of video, every single image, etc., all requires a level of writing and editing. So you need to be able to write that article, write that post captivatingly, and be able to bring in or add value to an audience specifically. Also, you need listening skills, they found, or they thought, or they believe. So they also found that you need strong listening skills. This is obviously to do with what the client's needs are, and this is kind of more of a business thing as well, but you need to be able to listen to what the client's needing and what the client's pain points are specifically, but also to be able to listen to other co-workers and other people in your industry, to listen to see what's working for them at the moment, but also to understand and see how you can make better content when it comes to the market as well. So in my view, you need to actually be able to listen to your co-workers, but also listen to the market, but of course listen to your client as well. And this kind of leans into number 3, which they said was customer care. It leads into understanding your target market's pain points or their issues, and also allowing you to make clearer call to actions and add more value to those people. Of course, we can't have social media without understanding data and understanding data analytics. So their number 4 was analyzing. So something which is key is when you do anything in the online space, it's able to read and then understand that data. So what is the views on the post specifically telling you? What is that interaction specifically telling you? What is that click-through rate specifically telling you? And how can we potentially A/B test or make that 1% improvement on the content, the written content that we're creating, those thumbnails we're creating, that video content or the photo content that we're creating for our marketing and of course our advertising as well. There's also a conversation regarding paid ads as well. So we need to understand how and why and when to use paid ads, but also something that I have been having a lot of conversations about lately is really getting clear on what you want those paid ads to do. So is it an awareness campaign? Is it going to drive leads? Is it going to drive sales? Is it going to push more traffic to our website or a landing page? What specifically do you need for that creative? What key performance indicator are you going to use? But then also, what part of the system, the business growth system, is that ad or is that piece of content or both going to serve? So this could be looking at the creative you use in your ads, but also looking at where you're placing them, how you're targeting them, and also to an extent how much money you're putting behind it as well, because that will drastically change the number of people across how much time and how warm that new audience becomes. Are you creating a retargeting audience, etc.? These are things that you should understand and need to understand when it comes to working in social media in 2024. They found also number 6 was a research, so the ability to be able to do researching well. Something that I've personally found as I've worked on the show more and more is it's better to have the better the researched content or the better written the content is, the more value you can add in a shorter period of time. With the rise of mis and disinformation, content creators, I would also argue, need to fact check what they're doing and make sure that any data or any evidence that they're claiming is coming from a valid source, but also can be backed up with evidence. So this is the articles I'm using, these are the videos I'm referring to, etc. That's why personally I always use source notes and always reference my source notes, because it allows the user, you, to be able to double check and triple check and be able to go into more detail on a specific topic that maybe I don't feel I can add any value to, but you can double check and look to see, is it factual? Is what I'm saying absolutely 100% concrete, or is it not? Or is there a side that I'm maybe not talking about? And I think that, as content creators, as people who put stuff out into the world, we are potentially responsible for that as well. They also said that number 7 was photo editing, right? So with the rise of everyone having a 4K camera and a great photography camera in their pocket every hour of every day, it's becoming harder and harder to stand out. One of the ways that you can is by having a clear editing style that will mean that your content will be seen as yours, or you will have your signature touch. With the rise of with the infographic, they said or they suggested that you should use a mix of organic content mixed with user-generated content and stock imagery. Personally, I would stay away from stock imagery at all costs, as it doesn't really allow you to stand out and you'll end up being in the sea of sameness, because stock footage or stock etc., unless it's going to add to the story you're trying to tell, don't use them flat out. Use it as supporting footage, or use it as supporting imagery to help tell that story or help articulate that message, because otherwise, and I would always recommend going the extra mile with your content, because it will be one of the reasons why you stand out, but also 2, you've taken it more seriously, you've taken those energy, you've taken maybe that resource, you've taken more money, you put more money into the content. It's going to feel more polished, it's going to feel more professional, it's going to not feel just like a quick and dirty, or you care less about the outcome of the content. you care specifically and you're trying to earn more and more of your audience's trust, to be able to be a source, to be able to help them move forward and add value hopefully to their life and fix some of their challenges as well. And I don't feel stock helps do that personally. It's a quick fix perhaps, it's a cheap fix perhaps, but it can also damage potentially your reputation and your brand, because you are going to be potentially perceived as someone who is cheaper. Now if that's part of your unique selling proposition, fantastic. But if it's not, which is 95% of the people we serve, then you should consider how it's going to be perceived from your potential customer or potential client as well. Moving on to number 8, which is they thought was going to be designing. Now, you don't have to be an expert in any of these things, of course, but being able to have a basic level of design skill is absolutely needed when it comes to developing social media graphics, and also being able to create video thumbnails, and been able to have a good understanding of Photoshop or Canva to be able to help and fix your clients' challenges when it comes to, we have a specific post, we're trying to build some carousels, we're trying to help articulate our value add to the market, and some of the time we may use photos or graphics to do that rather than a video or photos or written text, to keep that interest kind of coming through as well. But as I said, if you're trying to build a YouTube channel, there's incredible benefits to having a level of design. Of course, when it grows, and if you're willing to put money into it, then hire a designer to up that level again. But everything comes with levels, and that also kind of is true when it comes to the last one, which they believed was video content creation. With the rise of short form and the SEO gains of long form content being created on video creation, or the concept of creating video content is a must needed skill in the social media landscape in 2024 as we go into the next years to come as well. What do you think is going to be some of the things that maybe wasn't mentioned in this infographic, wasn't mentioned here, that you think is really, really important? You know, are we going to have maybe AI on there specifically, the ability to use AI, or do you think AI is going to fall back and not necessarily be as prominent necessarily? But let me know in the comment section down below. On the 19th of September, Social Media Today reported that, quote, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg is one of 49 signatories on a new open letter that urges the EU regulators to loosen the restrictions on AI development in order to avoid the region falling behind on the rest of the world regarding the broader AI race. Meta and others' views is that the EU will fall behind on how amazing or not a lot of the AI models is going to be. However, there is wider reporting that is where people are not overly happy with the fact that Meta is using a lot of its platforms, so a lot of your posts, to train its AI data models. So there was a large kind of conversation that really coerced or really happened and really showcased the reality when it came to ensuring or questioning whether people were going to be happy with their post being used as a data model for Meta AI, which Mark is Mark Zuckerberg's new AI model, and it's one of the leading data models. And we're seeing this rise in people kind of running or rushing towards a data model to specifically grow their way forward, or grow and be the chalice of the best AI to be used. And I think there is going to be a reality where, the AI is out of the bottle now, right? We're never going to be in a world where we can't utilize it and use it. And I think that those who learn the skill set learn how to use it and how to leverage it. There's obviously a legal question and a legal argument regarding the copyright of content that's being used to train the models, but I think the reality, regardless of what happens with that legal argument, is going to be, if you can use your ChatGPTs, your Meta AIs, etc., to up what you're doing, that's always going to be valuable to the market. to help you move yourself forward, help you be in a position where you can move forward in that regard as well. This also comes as a time where there has been some reports where some people who, there's been a large conversation in the stock market around people pumping a lot of money into the AI stocks, these big tech companies looking to, really, really develop large sums of money to develop these AI products and these AI data models. And now the question is, and it's starting to come out now, that the people who've done that, the people who've really invested in it, have said, well, where's the money? It's not getting that much better. It's not becoming this miraculous solution that everyone thought it was. So this is a time where it's suddenly losing some momentum, or it's starting to lose momentum. So is that going to be the continued trend, or are we 2, 3, 6 months away from the new jump in technology, the new jump in AI? There was also some reports around, it was kind of the conversation and Mega's argument was around, do Europe want to be the forefront or the forerunner on making sure, or being in a position where they are the head of the regulation? And is that going to be concerned, or is that going to be misrepresented or seen potentially as, or instead of it being ahead on AI technology itself? And we could be in a world where if Europe regulation continues to exist and continues to be the way it is, that we as Europe could fall behind in respect to what's out there, what we can use, how we can use it, because of the regulation, because of the combined laws like the GDPR laws and etc. that do exist in Europe, where they're less freeing. And that's why this letter is calling for more freer regulation, or freer from regulation, to not slow down AI's growth and AI's been able to use those data models and build better data models and be able to make AI better and more useful. I guess this brings up the question of, is it going to be growth at all costs just to make it better, or should we make sure that we're growing in the right way? And Social Media Today reported at the end of its article, there is some fair notes on both, quote, there is some fair notes on both sides, but I'm not sure I would agree that having corporate entities implying public pressure on regulatory groups in order to benefit their own interests, end quote. This again leads back to that conversation regarding how much power does big tech have, especially if we're going to be in a world where they have the data models, they have the AI technology. Is this going to be a position, or is this going to be a reality where we're going to have the quote unquote misinformation level conversation related to AI growth as well? Because I think it's very concerning, or we shouldn't be, in my opinion, in a world where the large tech companies can pressure and lobby the regulators to basically give them free rein, because we haven't. Unfortunately, it was one of these conversations. I remember watching a video and reading an article from a couple of months ago now, which was like, we should have done this before AI was out of the bottle, right? We should have had these moral conversations about that, and it would be interesting to see how the legal system does tackle potential copyright infringements. We're seeing it where people's copyrighted works regarding their stock photography, or Adobe had some issues with it, but also book publishers have had issues with it, where these AI models are just scalping as much data as they can that's in quote unquote public domain, but it's completely removing or completely not thinking about the concept of people's copyright. People's, are you, something that I go out of my way not to do is plagiarize. And if I'm going to quote something, I quote it. And if I'm going to give you my opinion, I'm going to give you my opinion, right? AI is kind of blowing aside or pushing aside copyright and plagiarizing law, right, as well. So are we going to see a world where the legal powers that be, or the regulators that be, are going to go after that potentially and maybe slow down AI's progress? Or maybe is this as good as we're going to get AI? Yes, it's useful. Yes, it's usable in some realities and some contexts. But is this going to be the slowing down of AI's growth, leading into that stock conversation? When is it going to get to the point where it can quote unquote think for itself? When are we going to be able to create a world where we can actually run these computer farms that run the AI models as well? That's another thing that we need to think about, as well, because it takes a huge amount of computing power to assimilate this data and build these big data farm models. But they're my thoughts, they're my opinions. Do you agree with the letter that Meta put together or joined in that? Do you agree that larger big tech companies can push on regulators from public pressure to quote unquote open the gates or open the floodgates on AI development? Let me know in the comment section down below. In linked Meta news, we saw the Meta hosted Meta Connect 2024 on the 25th, so that'd been last week at the time of recording, where Mark Zuckerberg was able, the CEO of Meta, shared some accounts or some updates on the Meta Quest 3, which is their headset, Meta AI announcement, so what's going on with that, and also showing a live demo of some of what the Quest 3 does, but also showing some of the things they're working on when it comes to their new Meta glasses as well. They started by showcasing and explaining the updates to the new Meta Quest 3 headset. Some key takeaways are the gaming capabilities of this headset specifically, and also the fact as well that they've been working with Windows or Microsoft, to be able to for you to use any Windows 11 PC to create a virtual screen for you to work from just by wearing the Quest 3 and looking down at your keyboard. And they also have redesigned the Meta apps, so your Facebook, your Instagram and your WhatsApps, to have more custom built that is more designed around the VR space or the VR reality. And of course there was also some more hardware that they added, and it was allegedly the most powerful VR headset possible as well. So we'll see what happens when the competitors in the space as well, to see their new products and see whether they're going to decrown or allegedly decrown the Meta Quest 3. Leading into some updates on Meta AI, where the Meta AI can now understand images as well as text. The demo showed that you can now edit and update images that you upload with just text inputs. So I believe Mark Zuckerberg added a picture of himself, and then he added a new hat and also some new shoes and things like that as well, just from text prompts inside Meta AI. They also showed that you can now talk to Meta AI, and Mark shows things the best way to how to use quote AI bots moving forward is likely to be obviously a competitor to Google's Gemini and Apple's Siri, but there was a conversation from a creator or a example coming from a creator on stage that showed how he had trained Meta AI to be used as his personal assistant. Some examples he gave was sending DMs and sharing links. Now this may sound slightly primitive, but obviously we're in that stage where AI is still quite new. It's quite development, and we need to potentially, and as leading back to the conversation about AI in the previous story, is it going to get that much better specifically? After this, Mark talked more about the auto video dubbing feature that also lip syncs as well. So you basically will auto translate from your native language, the language which you uploaded the video in, into others. So there's talk about potentially going from English to Spanish at the moment, but I imagine they'll also roll that out to other potential languages as well in the coming weeks and months. And this will increase the potential audience that you have regarding your reels. We're seeing this also on YouTube. We're seeing this is quite common on long form and short form content, because it allows you to obviously be seen by non-English speaking nations if that's all you're doing. And we're seeing AI, and that's one of the things that AI is becoming incredibly useful for, is to get that feature to help video creators or real audiences or creators to be able to have more viewer potential, because it will be in their native language, along with also showcasing their new quote new VR goggles or new VR glasses. Their whole point was they're not ready to specifically ship yet because they want to make it better, they want to make it more streamlined, but it wasn't to have a kind of Meta Quest-esque size system. It's designed to look like a normal pair of sunglasses or a normal pair of glasses, but completely act as a virtual gimmick-esque. There's a conversation of is it a gimmick or not. But AI lens or AI glasses, potentially, that very future-proof, having those windows, having those holograms, those kind of things was discussed and showcased in that. So it'd be really, really interesting to see where those glasses specifically go as well. And obviously I will leave more resources down below. But what do you think? Do you think that, the Meta Quest is a great step forward in VR technology? Do you think that audio dubbing is going to be useful? Or are you more against the whole Meta AI PA style thing? Let me know in the comment section down below. Do you think the glasses are a bit of a gimmick? I'm unsure. I'll be interested to see when products and when they start actually shipping it to consumers, what that feedback is and how those glasses actually potentially could be the replacement in 5, 6, 7 years to how we use a smartphone today, right? If you talk to someone who was, 10, 15 years ago, would they agree that we would all have computers in our pockets and we would carry them around every day? Probably not. Are we going to be in a similar point of view with AI glasses, where everyone wears AI glasses and everyone can have a computer and we can have holograms, we can have holographic conversations, and we can have, our work there, and we can, etc. And we can do all of this really, really futuristic stuff? Or is it just going to be for tech geeks to play around with because it's cool, right? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And the final story of today is going to be some updates on the Mr. Beast lawsuit, or his name was named in a lawsuit because we got a new interview specifically put out by an alleged participant of this game show from a creator known as Atozy. So we got some more information regarding the actual details of the Beast games and where this alleged lawsuit came from that we covered in last week's show. And what it sounds like is that the production was kind of broken into two sections. So you had an LA percentage, an LA reality that was part of this 2,000 people, and then the winning 1,000 people then went to Canada, where the Amazon Studios side of the production then took place. So what it sounds like is likely going to be happening, what we found from this interview that I'll leave down in the description down below, was that Mr. Beast's production company was running the first half, as I imagine a big YouTube video or a set of YouTube videos to promote the fact that Beast Games was going to be on Amazon or Amazon Prime. And then the second half, when the final 1,000 contestants, so half of the original people who took part, was in a position where they went to Canada. And what it sounded like from the interview was that the Canadian side, so the last 1,000, was a lot better run, and there was a lot of the issues only really stemmed from the Las Vegas side of the production. So that's what we're going to be focusing on in this conversation today, and we're going to pick up some specific points in that interview as well that has come out. And of course I will leave the interview itself along with all the other resources in the show down below. The first claim that the interviewee made was that it was a comms challenge from the Mr. Beast team that was held to bring everyone out to the game show in LA. It was claimed that people were given their jerseys to wear, etc. It had their name, their number, contestant, etc. And then they were asked to sign NDAs. Now, this is most likely due to... So this is where the first kind of issue, I think, for me really sits, is when you're kind of trying to get through, and this is a logistical thing, sure, but when you're getting given your stuff for this game show, of course you've got to sign contracts, of course you've got to sign waivers, but do you give people enough time to understand what they're signing, understanding how and where and what they're signing, right? Or is it kind of a conveyor belt, right? We've got obviously 2,000 people, right? That's a lot of people, but do you give them the opportunity, or do you give them the position, or be in the position where you can actually read the contract you're signing, read the NDA you're signing, etc. Right? When does that NDA change? And this is where I think parts of the planning issues or parts of the logistical issues that we're going to talk about in this Las Vegas section of the Mr. Beast Games production really started to have issues, and this seems to be the main crux of the lawsuit and the main crux of the problem here, followed by then them having to wait hours in quote trash bags where many people will get hot, etc. There was claims that food and water was given out, but it sounded like they were waiting around for 8 hours or so. Again, this is likely to do with either not having the right logistics in place or being in a position where you haven't run something of that scale, so you aren't gonna, and maybe perhaps giving Jimmy the benefit of the doubt here that he maybe miscalibrated or didn't think about it enough to bring in a logistics company to help with the logistics of this necessarily. Someone with, and even though it says in his how to be successful on a Mr. Beast production, the document that got leaked a couple of weeks back, we're in a position where they say one thing in their official documentation, but clearly the consultants they're using are allegedly either not doing it right or they're getting it wrong, and then leading to these issues, right? Because that does seem to be the issues. It's fine if you want to wait around, but the reason why people would be put in trash bags is so that obviously when they're moving from public place to public place, so from a hotel to a bus to then move to the stadium, for example, that they're not obviously seen, and it's kind of keeping it under wraps a little bit. But all the conversation would have just added in, oh, you don't need to wear these inside because no one's going to see you, right? When the only time you need to actually, bring them or wear them is moving from point A to point B, right? So it sounds like a little thing, but obviously there's a lot of issues that have been caused by this. People getting hot, people getting concerned, some people fainting, etc. Those kind of things has happened because of just not communicated effectively, and maybe not making sure that those scripts are in place when it comes to, say, signing, because you're going to see everyone when you're signing NDAs anyway. So it's more about how do you articulate to those people and how do you deal with the logistics, and it sounds a lot like a logistical issue. And for me, and we'll go over it a little bit more, that it is more of a logistical issue. So the interviewee claimed that due to the fact that they were moving 2,000 people, it was nearly 10 p.m. end quote at night before they had a level of quote sit down meal, right? Apparently they were offered a little bit of breakfast, etc. But that one of the issues is the kind of, I guess, the malnourishment or the lack of ability to get food and water. There was some talk in this interview about they were giving out food and water, but again, there's just more and more evidence coming back that it was just a really, really bad planned, the logistical side was really badly planned, and this is some more evidence for that as well. And this would all be done in pre-production, right? So all of this planning should have taken in pre-production. It's little things. How are we going to logistically give 2,000 people bathroom breaks and not have a knock-on effect to filming? How long is each challenge going to take? You can plan these things, etc. But when you get into production, these challenges can take place. And allegedly they worked with experts to realise or think about these challenges moving forward, or how long these challenges would take. But then there was contradictory things. And when you're dealing with this volume of people, you have volumes of issues regarding, their medication, etc. Things like this. And I think that's where those claims really come from. There was more challenge misplanning, where one challenge was to break teams into groups of 500 each, where they had 400 jerseys for each team, end quote, and some big guys just ran up and grabbed the jerseys, starting to hand them out to other bigger guys, clearly giving them an advantage in the tug of war style challenge. It's likely that the bigger guys would ended up at the start, so whoever would have done on the losing side would have ended up getting pulled over each other, so it would have been likely that the game is normal for fun and not for $5 million. So there was also quotes where people weren't falling over each other. No one was trying to injure anyone in this challenge, but so the first specific challenge that was talked about was basically a massive tug of war, right? And the issue with this massive tug of war is when you have that number of people, anyone who's played tug of war will obviously understand that when the losing team gets physically pulled one way, the back of that team is going to get crushed up and potentially on top of each other. So that's where allegedly some of those injuries potentially came from, those concerns potentially came from regarding, the bigger guys going after or looking at or etc. being in a position where is it manipulatable? Sure, but is it fair to say, or is it fair that there should be safeguards in place when it comes to safeguarding, because you're playing for 5 million, right? So this is life-changing money. This is in a position where this money is legitimately life-changing for a lot of people and for everyone really. And it's that question of how and when did these things go, and it just sounds more and more as if the planning and the scope and Mr. Beast production, not him specifically, but the production company or his team, wasn't prepared and wasn't ready for this scale of production. And I think people like Amazon Studios, etc., they would be more used to something this size, hence why Canada specifically went a lot better, allegedly, from the interviewee's point of view. So it also sounded like, just because of how long these productions took, how these challenges took to do, that mostly that it was filmed inside the stadium and it was filmed at night, right? So the issues you've got there is, of course, if people are sleeping in the day, their circadian rhythm is going to have to be shifted to basically being up all night and then sleeping in the day, right? And anyone who's either been up all night or being in a position where you've had to either have lack of sleep or etc., you'll know you feel horrible, but also you have higher levels of adrenaline and you're in a position where you're physically not going to be as capable. And in a physical challenge like the first one was, you're potentially going to operate or be in a different boat than someone who is well rested, right? So again, some more signs of misplanning or misjudgment was the concept that, the interviewee claimed that, part of from their view, part of the challenge was, being lack hygiene, not getting necessarily undergarments and etc. But also there was claims at the interview said, I quote, can't stress enough that you're able to walk out at any time. If you did not feel comfortable in the situation or for anything, you could just leave. The interview also claimed that he was paid $2,000 for less than 2 weeks worth of work. Quote, if you had got out in the first Las Vegas challenge, you would have been paid $2,000, end quote. However, the interviewee did say that he wasn't aware of any NDAs in regards to only getting the money if you signed an NDA, right? So there's been this conversation about, are people being paid off not to join a class action lawsuit, etc. The lawsuit itself does claim and does talk about the fact that these contestants should potentially be treated as employees, right? And that would of course change how much they're paid, the rights they're entitled to, etc. The interviewee also claimed that a lot of the lawsuit is mostly BS. Quote, you're kind of a bitch or a little baby in general for not getting food when you needed it. Quote, around 1,000 people who made it to Canada wanted to be there and are desperately willing to tell their stories but can't due to NDAs, end quote. There was also claims within this interview where a lot came from casting companies. So the question was, did the people that you were bringing into this challenge really, did they need the money? But also, are they going to be people that have necessarily bigger egos and are going to find it quote unquote harder? Surely it isn't part of the point is to be mentally tough enough to deal with this conversation or deal with this challenge or deal with the reality of, it's a week of uncomfortability to potentially, or 2 weeks, to potentially win, 5 million in that respect as well. So there's that conversation. But did those people from LA, did those people that allegedly came from this casting company, were they in a position where they're a little bit more egotistical, you could say, right? Do they necessarily need the money? Are they doing it for the exposure, etc.? Things like that. And I think that's where the lines get slightly blurred, and some of them claimed to, quote, potentially have large egos and wanting to control stuff that they couldn't control. So it sounded like, again, some more evidence also came to light about Mr. Beast wasn't really ready for a production size of this level as well. There was also some claims where, quote, unfortunately got pushed over, people broke ribs and hands too. Keep in mind, these people were taking part were all ages from 18 to 75. So I think a lot of it is, there's been, a lot of this we've covered is, there's been now clearly lack of planning from the beginning stages, clearly lack of planning when it comes to the scale of the challenges, clearly lack of planning when it comes to 2,000 people specifically, being brought into this stadium to take part in this massive game show. Were the right consultants really put on? Was the right funding put into the right places? Do they need to, or would they have needed to put, obviously more money into the logistics side of catering and sleeping and housing? And there's a lot more details that in the interview, and this is only covering what I've managed to take from first half of this interview, and in next week's show we'll be talking about the second half. But I think the clear thing is here, I don't know whether the lawsuit will, as I said in last week's show, I don't think the lawsuit will necessarily go anywhere, because even if it does, and even if it's seen to be wrongful, and it does seem as if there is a level of lack of planning and a level of inconvenience and a level of shit taking place, that it will necessarily be played out in public, because Mr. Beast isn't going to want that on his reputation. He's already got enough going on with everything else that we've already discussed in previous episodes, and this could be a level of him selling out potentially, or this could be just a bump in the road for him. But they're my thoughts on the first half of this interview with one of the people specifically who took part in the Mr. Beast games. It does sound like most of the production is finished now, and it would be in post-production if it is going to take place, but there's still questions in the air on whether there is or isn't, or whether it is or isn't. So that's things to consider. But thank you ever so much for listening to this part of the show. If you do have an opinion on was it malnourishment, was it lack of planning, was it logistics, or is the Mr. Beast production just cocked up, or is it something more fruity, you could say, in that respect? I'd love to hear what you think in the comment section down below. And that is going to wrap up the end of the show today, so thank you ever so much for coming back and joining me. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode of the show. Thank you ever so much for coming back and joining me, and I'll see you very